Hello, how you doing and welcome back to the channel. So, New Zealand against South Africa in the Rugby Championship this weekend. A game I cannot wait for, proves to be an absolute blockbuster. Both teams have now named their matchday 23s for the weekend. So I'm going to be previewing the game in this video, just picking out a few different bits that I think are interesting. Make sure you have your say down below. Who do you think is going to win the game first of all, and what do you make of the various things in terms of the tactical battle, some of the key positional things that I touch upon in the video. Cannot wait for it. If you can like the video and subscribe to the channel as well, I'd massively appreciate it. Trying to grow as much as possible ahead of the Rugby World Cup, which kicks off in a few months. But let's get into it. So I'm going to start off talking about the All Blacks. I did a longer video talking about the Springbok selection earlier in the week because they named their team on Tuesday. So there's probably a bit more fresh stuff to get into when talking about New Zealand. But I will mention South Africa as well and talk about the game as a whole. So putting that New Zealand side up on screen, a few different things that I wanted to go through. The first of all is Sam Whitelock and the fact that he hasn't been included. Really interesting that Ian Foster at his press conference was obviously asked about him. It was one of the first questions he got asked about in terms of injuries, and he said he is available. He could have been selected, but they have erred on the side of caution on this occasion and basically just given themselves an extra bit of time to get him right, to get him back to full fitness. And for me, it's one of those selections that I think is a sensible choice. The coaches and everyone in that setup have a pretty good idea of what's best at this moment in time for the player and for the squad as a whole in such a big year. I do wonder if it would be the same if it wasn't in a Rugby World Cup year, which is a bit of a if but maybe. The reality is it is a World Cup later this year, but I do wonder if it's just one of those selections that on this occasion, despite this being a massive game and the Rugby Championship possibly being on the line, I would expect the winner of this one to most likely go on and win the competition. But I just wonder whether it would be different in a World Cup year. But anyway, so no Whitelock in the second row. They stick with Brodie Retallick and Scott Barrett, who I thought actually have gone pretty well recently, so I don't mind that selection too much at all. Shannon Frizell in the back row as well. I wanted to mention him. I said before the Argentina game that he was a player I wanted to see just a little bit more of at international level. I've always liked him in Super Rugby, but perhaps I'd always felt that he needed to do a bit more international level. Again, I thought he actually had a pretty good game against Argentina. So he goes again in the back row with Kane and Ardie Savea. And then they've gone for Taylor, the experience at hooker, and Groot and Lomax, who seem to be the number one props at the moment for the All Blacks. Number 10 is the other position actually that is, I guess, a talking point for New Zealand. Richie Mo'unga comes back in. Damian McKenzie started against Argentina, did a pretty good job. But Ian Foster has said that Richie Mo'unga was always going to start, which is interesting, actually, that kind of premeditated thing of Damian McKenzie. They wanted to give him a go against Argentina. Both of the 10s, actually, their form in Super Rugby has been so good that I think you could probably debate and the finer points about both of them. But Richie Mo'unga starts the game. Damian's rested. Both those players are some of the highest minutes in Super Rugby, which is a point that Ian Foster stressed in that press conference. And McKenzie, not part of the matchday 23. They wanted to rest him, give him a moment to recover. It does kind of strike me at the moment, as good as the form of Damian McKenzie has been, and it's been brilliant to see him back in an All Blacks jersey, I feel like in those big games, and this is one obviously this coming weekend, that Richie Mo'unga is the guy. When it comes to those big games at the World Cup, at this moment in time, if they were playing a quarter-final tomorrow, or if it was the opening game against France at the Stade de France on the 8th of September, I feel like Richie Mo'unga is the fly half that has the favour of the coaches and is most likely to start. This is a big test for him. I think Damian McKenzie is good enough to play his way into that jersey, but that's the way it feels to me at this moment in time. And Mo'unga is going to have a massive role to play in this game because I think it's going to be tactical. I think the kicking side of the game and the game management for both sides is absolutely pivotal because either side can punish the other if they get opportunities. So Mo'unga's got a pretty good role to play. Can't really mention the fly half position without mentioning Barrett at fullback. I know a lot of All Blacks fans would rather see Will Jordan play there or Stevenson play there, but Barrett has been given the nod once again at fullback. Part of the reason, actually, Ian Foster said, is that Will Jordan wasn't with them last week because he was dealing with a slight knock. He wasn't there, so they didn't want him at fullback. They almost felt it better to bring him in on the wing, give him a run there. And then actually, I think we're most likely going to see him play fullback at some point during the game. But it means that Beauden Barrett gets the nod at fullback once more. And then the final thing from an All Blacks perspective that I wanted to mention actually is the bench, because a lot is starting to get made of the fact that the second half of games or the final 20 minutes of games over the last year or so for New Zealand has actually been pretty poor. I mean, the most obvious example for me in England is the game at Twickenham, where New Zealand had the game won. They ended up drawing it with a comeback from England. And again, it was similar against Argentina, not as impressive performance in the second half. The bench has to have an impact against this Springbok bench, because we all know about the bomb squad, and this is a packed South Africa side who will have power in spades coming off the bench. I think New Zealand and that bench in particular really needs to match them on this occasion. That's going to be a pretty key area of this game, because I expect it to be tight. I don't see either team running away with it. So when it comes to that second half and those benches coming on, it's going to be absolutely key, I would imagine. Let's move on to South Africa. As I say, I've done a wider chat about their squad in the video I uploaded the other day on Tuesday. The main thing really to update you on is Eben Etzebeth, which many of you would have seen. Tragically, his father has passed away in South Africa. So on recording of the video, it's uncertain whether he will play and captain the Springboks. That might have changed by the time you watch this. I don't know when they're going to put an announcement out whether he flies back home or whether he stays and captains the side. And obviously, it's one of those occasions where, frankly, you know, your job isn't that important in a moment such as this. It's entirely up to him. It will be left up to him about whether he feels he wants to play or whether he wants to go back home. Understandably, no doubt, he's very, very emotional, and your heart goes out to him. A horrible thing to have to deal with. I'm sure he will make a decision that is best for him, whether he thinks that is playing and honouring his father that way. I can imagine we can expect a pretty monster performance if he does that, or if he says he'd rather go home, be with his family and mourn. It's entirely up to him, and it kind of puts things into context a little bit, I suppose. As much as we're all really excited about this game and how big it is, and you know, as fans, of course, we're going to get excited. It's just a reminder that sometimes some things are more important. So our heart goes out to him. Outside of that, kind of what I said the other day is it is a team packed full of power. Even if you lose Etzebeth coming off the bench, a 6-2 split of Vermeulen, Peter Steff, Snyman, that front row replacement. So that's why I feel like that All Blacks bench has to at least try and match what the Springboks are going to bring. I guess if Etzebeth does drop out, they have a number of options there, whether Snyman comes straight in or whether Lou de Jager moves from, not Lou de Jager, sorry, Franco Mostert moves into the second row. We'll wait and see, but I think they do have options there, the Springboks, and I think this game, yeah, I absolutely can't wait for it. In terms of what type of game we're going to see, conditions I think are going to play a big part. From what I've heard, what I've looked up, looks like it could be pretty wet, pretty rainy. And these are two sides I actually feel can switch up their style of play. Mentioned it on the channel quite a lot already when speaking about the Springboks. They have developed their game over the last 18 months to 2 years to be able to do more in the wide channels and be more attacking. I do wonder whether this match, if it is pretty tough conditions, and Faf de Klerk at scrum half up against Aaron Smith, Mo'unga at fly half, along with Damian Willemse for the Springboks. Yeah, I just wonder whether it's going to be a pretty tactical game, quite a lot of kicking, field position and territory being key, and then capitalising on mistakes. I still think it could be a brilliant contest if that is the case, but I'm not sure we're necessarily going to see kind of some of the open attacking rugby that we saw in the opening round for both of these sides. I would be delighted if I get proved wrong, but that's just my kind of gut instinct on this. The final thing I wanted to mention before I end the video, and again something Ian Foster mentioned in his press conference, is these sides are going to play each other this weekend. They've then got a World Cup warm-up at Twickenham, which is pretty close to being a sellout, actually. I'm not sure what the latest ticket sales are, but I've been slowly kind of watching it over here. And I mean, it's not really any surprise with the amount of New Zealand and South Africans that live in London. But I think that could be a great occasion. But they've got that match, and then they potentially got a quarter-final at a World Cup where they meet as well. So there's a bit of a game of chess going on here. I don't think either side are going to want to show their full hand to each other, potentially because of the fact that they're meeting themselves later on this year. So that's another layer of, you know, quite what they do and quite how they approach the game. I think it is going to be fascinating. I honestly can't call it. I guess you'd maybe give the edge to the All Blacks, given the fact that they're a home team. I think that can often play a part in a game like this, but I can't wait for the occasion. I think it's going to be absolutely brilliant. Make sure you drop a comment down below. Let me know who you think is going to win this game. I think it's pretty tough to call personally, but I look forward to reading your comments. And anything else that I haven't mentioned as well, tactical battles, where you think the game will be won, selection decisions as well. I think there's quite a lot to get into with this one, so I look forward to reading your comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel as well, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.